And we're back with Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition, The Root of All Evil, Part 3. Now, when we left off, LJ just told everybody that Brielle is dead, and Marcus called LJ so that he could arrange a meeting between himself, LJ, and his sister Marcia. Q was on his way back to the Denver house to find out what was going on with Angela. Q pulls up outside the gate, punches in the code, pulls down the driveway, pulls up outside the house, hops out, heads to the door, and almost forgets to help Miss Bernie out of the truck. He goes back and opens the door for her because he's a gentleman. Walks Miss Bernie up to the door, puts in his code, goes in the house, and yells out, "Angie!" Regina comes out of the study and says, "Shh, she's resting." Q says, "What's going on with her? Is it her blood pressure? Is she swelling again? Is she in pain?" Regina says, "Well, dang, Q, you know a whole lot about what's going on with her and her pregnancy, huh?" Q says, "Listen, I'm keeping up with everything that's going on with Angie." Regina says, "Angie? What happened to Mrs. Washington?" Q says, "Listen, she insisted that I just call her Angie. I don't have time for this. Stop playing, Regina. What's going on with Angie?" Regina says, "I'm really kind of concerned. We called the doctor earlier. He told us to track the pains and everything. We got her feet elevated." Q says, "Okay, where is she? I need to see her feet." Regina says, "You need to what?" Regina walks into the study with Q and Miss Bernie on her heels. Q walks over to Regina, drops down on his knees, and he starts looking at her feet. And he says, "We don't have time to call a doctor. Her feet shouldn't be this swollen." He tries to wake her up, and as usual, she's hard to wake up. But this time, she's not waking up. He says, "Call 911. Regina says, "What's wrong? She's only been asleep for like an hour, hour and a half." He says, "I told her to let the doctor know that this was going on. Just call 911. Regina calls 911, and the ambulance is on their way. Meanwhile, in North Carolina, Marcus is waiting outside of LJ's office for his sister Marcia to pull up. Marcia pulls up, and she's glad to see her brother. "Marcus, thank you so much for calling. Again, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." Marcus is like, "Marcia, this isn't the time. We just need to get in here and get this over with." They ring the bell. LJ comes and lets them in. It's after hours, so April is off. LJ walks them into the conference room, tells them to have a seat. Marcia says, "I truly had no idea. Marcus just started telling me about what was going on not too long ago, and I never put two and two together." LJ says, "Don't beat yourself up. It wasn't obvious. So tell me, how did you meet Jessica?" Marcia goes on to tell how she met Jessica freshman year, how they were college roommates, how they moved off campus and got an apartment together, and they remained college roommates until they graduated, and they remained in touch after college. When Marcus and Angela first started dating, Marcia mentioned to Jessica that Angela was from the same small town in Georgia where Jessica was from. She asked her if she was familiar with Angela Spencer, and Jessica pretended like she didn't have a clue who she was. Marcia showed her a picture, and Jessica said she didn't recognize Angela. Jessica overall was a good roommate. She didn't have a bunch of company over or wild parties. She did her schoolwork, she worked, she paid her bills on time. One of the things that I noticed is she had a lot of mood swings. One day she was up, the next day she was down. She hardly ever even talked about her family. She only mentioned having one sister who died when they were small children. So after I showed her the picture, she started acting strange. She left the house and said she was going home for the weekend, and when she came back, she was in a better mood. I didn't think anything of it. As time progressed, Marcia would tell Jessica things like, "Oh, my brother and Angela are getting engaged this weekend. I'm going in town for the surprise engagement party. Oh, my brother and Angela are getting married. I'm going to be in the wedding. Oh, my brother and Angela bought a house. Oh, my brother got a job at this firm. Oh, my brother and his wife started a new business." And some of the run-of-the-mill things that you might share with a friend. As Marcia goes on, Marcus becomes more and more upset. And finally he says, "But what would make you tell somebody that I don't know all of these things about me?" Marcia says, "But it was a part of normal conversation. Wasn't sharing intimate details about you all's life." Well, Marcus says, "So, did you ever mention to her the different times when we had IVF scheduled?" Marcia says, "I think I did. Marcus says, I can't believe this. So that's why she was so insistent that I go on the Dallas trip, and the New York trip, and the Aruba trip. She was trying to sabotage the IVF process. She's the reason why my wife and I will never have any children. Marcia starts crying and she says, I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry. LJ interrupts and says, Marcia, stop apologizing to him. I'm not even friends with him. And he used to brag to me all the time about his big sister and how you were in medical school and all of the great things that you were doing in your life and when you bought your house. Marcus says, but that's different. I've known you since Kyle. LJ says, exactly. You've known me just as long as your sister has known Jessica. LJ says, now, Marcia, you and Jessica went to school together at South Carolina State, right? Marcia says, yeah. But then you transferred to Duke for medical school, right? Marcia says, the whole time that we were in college, Jessica told me that she had a boyfriend back home in Georgia. So on breaks, she would leave and go back to Georgia. When we graduated from South Carolina State, we stayed in South Carolina for a little while, and she moved back to Georgia before I went to Duke. So before you moved back home, you didn't know that Jessica lived in North Carolina? Marcia says, no, I had no clue. I didn't find out that she moved to North Carolina until Mom Brenda was sick, like a year ago or so. And I told her that I was moving back home and opening a practice here so that I could help Marcus take care of Mom Brenda. I never planned on moving back home. I was happy where I was. I had my dream job. I bought my first house. I was dating, enjoying being in a new city. Jessica had to tell me that she was moving to North Carolina when I told her that I was coming home because she knew that the chances of me running into her someplace were going to be really high. Marcus asks, so what did she tell you? Marcia says, well, she told me that she got a job offer in North Carolina and that she wanted to move her and Melissa and her mom so that she could take care of her mother because her mother was sick and her mother needed better medical care. I told her when I would be in North Carolina and that I would help her look for places. She told me that she already had somebody who found a place for her and her mom and Melissa and that she would just let me know when she got settled. Marcus asks, so she told you that she was living with her mother? And Marcia says, yeah, that's where I went to visit her at her mother's house. Marcus says, so she never let you know that she had her own house? Marcia says, no, I thought that her mother, and Melissa all lived together. I saw her maybe 3 or 4 times since I've been back. I figured she was just really busy with the new job and taking care of the baby and taking care of her sick mom. LJ says, and you had no clue that she's been living here for 5 years? Marcia says, none. We stayed in touch, but we weren't best friends. Well, who did you think Melissa's father was? When she called and told me that she was pregnant, I thought it was with the boyfriend back in Georgia. I knew that her boyfriend died in a boating accident while she was pregnant. So I put 2 and 2 together and figured it was him. We never talked about it. I also knew that he named her on the insurance policy, and so she had that money that she could live on. She wasn't pressed to work, and she never even mentioned a job. Marcus says, I'm just worried about how much you've told her over 15 or so years that she's using now to find my wife. Let's assume that she remembers everything. She probably started putting her plan in place back when you showed her that picture of Angela. Do you happen to remember what that boyfriend in Georgia's name was? Marcia says, no, but I'm sure if you talk to Miss Maria, she should probably know. LJ says, I'll do that. In the meantime, I need you two to stay focused on just staying safe. Jessica is dangerous. Marcus says, well, if you tell me where my wife is, I can focus on keeping her safe. LJ says, no need. She has a full security team, and I have one of my men on her 24/7. Marcus says, you have a man on my wife 24/7? I should be on my wife 24/7. LJ says, and what would you be able to do? You wouldn't bust a grape in a fruit fight. Earlier, you mentioned that Jessica's pregnant again. Are you sure it's yours?